Mr. Koretz, Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Weezer, myself, Bernard Parks, as chair. Mr. Smith will not be present today, but his staff is here. And so one of the things we'd like to do is take 2 consent items, then we'll go to closed session. For those that are here for item 8, we're going to deal with that last so that we do not, because it's the most lengthy item on the agenda, and so we'll deal with that last. But on 14, colleagues, if we can get a concurrence on that item, which is the sale of parking lot. It's already gone through the surplus issue in CD 11, and that is going to be purchased by General Services. If we can move that item.
So moved.
All right, and then on item 15, also this is an item that deals with a number of easements, and I'd ask that we move that, and I'd just like to add one sentence into the committee report. The sentence would read that this item at this time would be an exception to our current financial policies in the city of LA, but due to the time that has passed and the fact that the city made errors early on this issue, that we would make an exception to the financial policies and move forward to have this $75,000 fees waived, and also that Department of Engineering does not find that to be a hardship.
So moved on that one.
Okay, we'll move that with those
And
comments.
if I might say, Mr. Chair, that Mark Antonio Grant, my deputy, worked on this for a couple of years with all the homeowners on the street. They didn't even know what was happening historically, and I just want to give him a shout out, who just, by the way, had surgery and is recuperating from it. But thank you, Mark Grant, for making this happen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll move those 2 consent items. We'll go in closed session on items 1 through 7, and then we'll come back with the remaining regular agenda.
Get a little bit.
We're going to reconvene the regular meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. We have a quorum: Mr. Weezer, Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Koretz, myself, Bernard Parks as chair. What we'd like to do on the remaining items 8 through 13. Let me just ask, do we need to do anything from close? Okay, from 8 through 13. I'd like to start off with number 9 and 10, and just ask that we receive and file those 2 items, because Jobs Committee has gone through a thorough analysis and has a committee report that's coming to council. So, in fact, if we can have Mr. Cohen comes up. Mr. Cohen, you were at the Jobs Committee, and they made all of those recommendations. We have 2 items on this agenda that were received and filed by Jobs, and so it's our intent to follow course with them, and we can't endorse their report today because it's not before us, but we'll receive and file these 2 reports and basically have their report come to council. So if you want to come up and comment on that, then, okay.
I want to thank you.
You want to talk on the BTAC and on the collections?
I can't talk on collections before it's presented also.
Okay, we have not gotten to 13, but I thought you wanted to talk on 9 and 10.
9 and 10.
Okay, go ahead and speak on 9 and 10, then we'll bring you back up for 13.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here today for, we believe, a very important decision.
The record.
Oh, thank you. I'm Mel Cohn, representing the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA. We are here today to support reestablishing the Business Tax and Advisory Committee, BTAC. We believe the accomplishments of BTAC 1 support having it reestablished, and we really appreciate the city's commitment to moving forward with a new round of business tax improvements. We are a business organization. We think it's vital to the economy of the city. Previously, we have sent a letter to Councilman Alarcon and Council President Garcetti with our recommendations for the structure of BTAC. I think the most important thing is VICA is not focused on the size of the committee, but we're rather focused on ensuring that the right people with the right expertise, including business, finance, and tax policy expertise, are included on this reestablishing of BTAC. We believe streamlining and reducing the city's business tax is vital to our economic recovery and for a long-term job creation. We believe that anything that can be done with business tax, it's always been a tiebreaker when people are doing due diligence, whether they're coming to the city or making a decision to stay in the city. And we believe we have to get away from being the tiebreaker where they go. So it's so important because every job loss or every job gain goes upstream to all the other areas of the economy. We'll be pleased to be working with Budget and Finance and Council in revitalizing BTAC, and we believe it's a very important endeavor because it was in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll receive and file 9 and 10, and like I said, the Jobs Committee report will be before Council very shortly. Go to the next item.
Next item is item number 11, which is the Controller's Reserve Fund Statement of Condition Report and status of all reserve fund loans as of June 30th, 2009.
Good afternoon.
Good
Can you just give us a brief overview of the reserve fund loan, and if you could give us any updated information since this report as to where is the reserve fund at this time?
I'm Sally Rocio from the Controller's Office. As of June 30, 2009, the Council approved loans amounted to $30 million, and the loans under Charter Section 261 is $44 million. The $30 million Council-approved loan includes loans that were long-term loans regarding the Portero Canyon loans and the Runyon Canyons and the aging loans. Of the $44 million loans granted under Charter Section 261, $15 million was for unfunded encumbrances that was reversed in July 1st. So $24 million was granted in 2009 as of June 30.
And then where are we today? Do you have any sense of where the reserve fund is as of October?
Oh, I don't have, I'm sorry, but we will be releasing our report before the end of October for as of September report, June 30.
Anything to say? Okay, we'll move that item number 11. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is item number 12, which is a CAO report and reimbursement resolution relative to judgment obligation bond issuance.
Mario Vasquez with the City Administrative Officer. The CEO does recommend that the City Council adopt a reimbursement resolution that allows the city to use the general fund or other city funds to pay judgments and settlement obligations and later reimburse itself from the proceeds of a bond issuance.
This is part 2 of the change recently that we made.
Yes,
No, or-
the legal change has occurred, as you know, Mr. Chairman. This is a reimbursement resolution which is required by the tax code. It's a technical requirement that if you spend money in advance and then you issue bonds later and want to reimburse the money you spent in advance, then the city has to adopt a reimbursement resolution.
Let me ask you one thing I didn't understand, is that it also says we have to go to the court to get that approved?
No, not the resolution.
No, just the cases that are financed with the bonds.
Okay, so when we talk about getting court approval, it's the settlements or
Yes.
the judgment?
Yes, that's right.
So nothing to do with the reimbursement, the
No, this is a technical requirement of the Internal Revenue Code so that the city can issue bonds for money in advance before. As you might remember, almost 2 months ago now, we settled 2 cases, the city settled 2 cases, and on the council record, it said that it intended to finance these with bonds. In order to do that, you have to adopt this resolution required by the code.
And we're saying on this resolution that we would max out at 50 million over an 18-month period.
Yes.
We may not use it all, but that's the authority.
Yes, under the tax code, you probably couldn't go beyond 18 months.
Okay. And then let me ask you are we looking at short or long-term debt? This is the length of the bonds?
It's a 10-year bonds, maximum 10 years.
10 years?
Well, the new amendment requires the maximum is 15, but we're probably going to do 10.
Okay. Have we, on this, if we go maximum the 50 million, is there any sense of what the debt service would be on that dollar amount?
We can get that information for you before it goes to council.
Could you do me a favor and get that to the clerk so they can put it in the report?
Yes.
So we'll move that item and ask that that information be given to the clerk so we can have it in the report. Next item.
Next is item number 13, which was continued from September 21st, 2009, which is an Office of Finance report on the feasibility of creating a pilot project to add additional collection agencies to the citywide collection program.
Let me ask, we have 2 comment cards, and we can have staff over here, we can have the 2 people come over, then you could fill in it. Mr. Serrano, Anthony Serrano, Mel Cohn, if you can come on this side. Okay. And then also David Farah, if you can come up. Could you do me a favor, let Mr. Cohen sit
sure.
there, and then we'll bring all the staff up at one time. You're on, sir.
Okay. My name is Anthony Serrano. I represent Pioneer Credit Recovery, Inc. We're a division of Sallie Mae Corp. out of New York. And for the past 20 years, I've been involved in court-ordered fees and fines in the state of California and at the national level as well as the U.S. federal courts. Prior to that time, I worked in the LA County court system, and I'm the one that put the court fees and fines program in California together using Penal Code 1214.1. So what I wanted to point out here are 4 quick things for you. Is that, number 1, I think the City of Los Angeles and the Department of Finance has done a great job in the past year and a half. They've been looking, number 1, at doing an amnesty program. Number 2, they're sold some debt, which is authorized under state law in order to recover monies. And number 3, now they're looking at ways to enhance or try to improve their contingency fee collections. And I just think it's ironic that when the city is trying to find ways to recover money that's owed, that when they're trying to standardize, and I think it's great that they're trying to standardize when these agencies are supposed to turn over the bad debt. If they can't collect these accounts within 6 months, it's the only right thing to do is turn the debt over and let a secondary agency try to recover that money. Unfortunately, in the situation where you're faced today is that you have a city department that does not want to give up the accounts. They want to sit on those accounts for 4 years. Their liquidation rate is less than 20%. That means that 80% of the accounts every year continue to go uncollected. So with that in mind, I think there's been a great amount of information brought forth that there's some restrictions by the Department of Motor Vehicles that precludes them from releasing information. I negotiated the first rate for the courts in order to get access to DMV records. That information is available online, and there is no information, there are no laws that prohibit the vendor from giving up that information. And the last thing I'll say, your current vendor not only has a front-end processing rate, they have a secondary contingency fee rate, and then the rate even goes up higher on a third rate just because they haven't collected the account, and that's an oxymoron. Thank you.
Thank you. Farah?
I wish I was tall as you, Chief.
Me too. Me too, David.
And he does too. He feels the same way. My name's David Farah. I am actually an attorney here in Los Angeles. I have previously represented the city on a number of real estate matters in my long and distinguished career. But right now I'm here. I'm actually an attorney with a collections law firm. I have been representing them in the county of Los Angeles for the last 6 years. We have contracts with the LA County Council and the LA County Treasurer and Tax Collector with respect to collections. The contract with the LA County Treasurer and Tax Collector involves secondary collections, which are collections for the Department of Health Services after the primary collector has given up, and those accounts would otherwise be written off. Since we started collecting those accounts in April, we've collected approximately $250,000 that would have been written off on those accounts. I'd like to applaud the City of Los Angeles, and particularly the Director of Department of Finance, for putting together what I think is a very efficient and aggressive program. I just think everything they're doing is first rate. There is one thing that I think could be tweaked, which is that most of the time periods during which collection firms were allowed to hold on to the accounts were established back during the days of paper records and paper file transfers, which all took a while, and then somebody had to open the envelopes and look through it all and do data input on another end. Right now, almost everything involved in the collection industry is data transferred on the internet with sophistication you really couldn't believe, and your Department of Finance is actually pretty up to date with respect to that. What that means is that the time sequence for collections has become far more rapid. So whereas people used to have accounts for 6 months, now they get them for 60 days, they turn them back. And I'm here for encouraging this committee to accelerate the turnover from collector to collector, to put it on a faster pace consistent with today's internet transfer world. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go on.
I'm Mel Cohn. I'm representing the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA. I am chair of VICA's ad hoc committee, which was formed to review the audit reports from the Controller's Office. In March of 2008, we made our first appearance regarding collections, noting that the bad debts were nearly 50% of our accounts receivable. We have worked with the Controller's Office, the former Controller's Office, and the Office of Finance. The issue is to expedite collection. In today's times, we have to increase the cash flow from these accounts receivable. They're aging out. Not enough attention is being paid to it. You are getting to a point where you're getting your low-hanging fruit, you're getting your immediate collections, and then it really drops from there. There is such a severe drop-off in time in today's collection world, especially with the technology, that we support the Office of Finance adding collection agencies to accelerate this process. I mean, the DOT and fire are 90% of the accounts receivables, and in looking at what occurred earlier this month in council, where the fire department was writing off 86,000. 68,000 has exceeded statute. That's unconscionable. So having said that, VICA supports collection efforts, supports accelerating collections, and supports the Office of Finance's recommendation to have more collection agencies. And again, anything we can contribute to help this, VICA will be there. Thank you very much.
We have the staff come up, please.
Pleasure.
Hello there.
Good afternoon.
We had this 2 weeks ago, and
Yes.
we continued it basically because of two issues that we hadn't resolved. But because I don't think all the members were here, if you can kind of give a thumbnail of where we are on the collection, the secondary, primary, RFPs, timing, and then get to the two issues that we had not resolved.
Okay. Pam Mooney, Office of Finance. Good afternoon. We were asked by motion to look at ways that we could improve collections, and so the motion was asked to look at the feasibility of adding new collection agencies to our existing firms that we had, that have been under contract for 2 years. Part of that was driven by the fact that we thought that we would have emergency ambulance billings being referred to collection agencies, which had not been previously referred, as well as parking tickets, uncollected parking tickets, where we were working with the Department of Transportation to possibly look at referring at a time to get a higher rate of collection. Both the fire department and the DOT parking ticket issues revolved around some legal concerns. So when we met last time, Councilmember Parks asked that we go back and work on this and come back to let you know what the result is. The city attorney is here with us today, but the bottom line is that our existing contract, we cannot add firms to our existing contract. So the 4 firms... The primary, right. We have 4 firms on contract. We have called all of the firms to find out how many staff are working our 300,000 accounts. There are over 60 staff working on the collection of those accounts, and should either the ambulance billing or the parking tickets come online, they can easily staff up within 2 to 3 weeks to bring on more people to work our accounts. So I think that was an initial concern. There is also a concern about a local presence. One of our 4 firms, Kane & Weiner, is a local firm, is located in the city, and they are working exclusively with the Office of Finance on our accounts that are over $3,000. So I think we do have a local presence. Of the dollars that are outstanding, they have over 52% of the actual dollars. So we are giving some business to our local firms, which was an initial concern. So we have met with Councilmember Hahn's staff and advised her that we are precluded from adding firms to our existing contracts, which do not expire until 2012.
Let me just clarify one thing, because I think that was what was unclear last time, is that by contract, when they came on board as part of the RFP, they were given access to all of the primary accounts.
I will let the city attorney answer that.
That is correct. We do have the ability to terminate those contracts with 30 days' notice. However, that would cause a great deal of upheaval within the Office of Finance to get restarted again. But those contracts were entered into in 2007. The 3-year term expires in 2010, and then there are 2 one-year extensions should the Office of Finance choose to exercise.
I think that's what has not been clear up till last meeting,
Right.
is that the RFP gives the primaries to them, and in order to cut into that business, you have to either terminate their contract or allow them to expire and then go out to new RFPs.
That's correct. We could terminate their contracts and then issue a new RFP presently, or we could allow the term of the contract, the present contract, expire by its terms in 2010 or at the end of the 2-year extensions, and then the other option would be to then add a secondary collection agencies.
Currently, the reason that you're recommending the new RFP for secondary is that we're not constricted by the current contracts. the current RFP.
That's correct, with a bit of a caveat, and that we have to be very careful in terms of how we draft that contract to ensure that the services to be rendered secondarily will be sufficiently different so that we don't violate the city's own contracting and procurement procedures.
Does it limit us at all in that, or under the 4 firms that are currently under RFP, are they in agreement or would be supportive of a secondary contract that they would turn these cases over in a year? Or do they have any say in that?
They really don't have any say. Under the terms of their contracts, they can only attempt to collect for a 1-year period, and they're obligated to return those accounts to the city at the end of that 1 year.
Mr. Parks, I will add that we have communicated with the preponderance of those agencies, and they say they have no problem with that at all.
And so if we go through the council and this is approved, the next step would be to go forward, and although we have a dated, I think we initially were talking about October 1st, what would be the timeline that we'd be going out for the secondary contract?
I believe that we have staff that are working on a draft RFP. As the city attorney advised, we have to be careful with the scope. But we do believe that that we can come up with a significant enough difference in what we're seeking, because this is an area that the city has not gone out to before. So we don't really know if there are other methods that the private sector is using for collection. As you heard from the public comment, that it's an electronic age. So our collection agencies right now are sort of the traditional standard agencies. So we really are wanting to explore what other methods. So we believe that we can draft an RFP that the scope is sufficiently different, and then go through the process and then be back to you with a contract award, I would say, in the spring.
You give me a month.
Mark?
I think that March would be a reasonable time frame.
Secondaries out until March, or they would be back to us in March?
You're asking how long it would take to complete the process and have a selection made?
I don't know what's the timeline of getting RFPs on the street?
December.
So we can get the contracts, the RFPs out December '09.
Right.
And then
Approximately
by March, you'd have people
on board.
Okay. Okay, the next step. Now we got those two resolved.
Okay.
Let me ask you one other thing before you go there. This does not limit our ability to sell debt.
No.
After they get their 6 months, and that's what we're going to limit it to?
Our intent is to limit it to
1 year, secondaries get 6 months,
That's our intent.
and then you can still sell debt.
Yes, and the sale of debt is post write-off by the Board of Review. So the city has basically declared the accounts uncollectible, and then, so that we would not be precluded.
No need of the RFP for those companies that buy debt.
We have a bidders list, approved bidders list that is still active.
Okay, next step.
Okay, now we have the two departments, Fire and DOT, both of which have representatives here. The Fire Department is moving along as we had discussed. Their next step is a business associates agreement with our outside collection agencies to allow for the exchange of information that is protected by the health insurance HIPAA requirements. So the city attorney has been reviewing that, and if Laurel, Ms. Leitner will come up, she can advise you as to the progress.
One of the 4 firms that are already under RFP?
We have a firm that is collecting on behalf of other firms or other cities that have HIPAA requirements, but there are some new wrinkles with the city.
Let me just ask, before you get started, on for the fire department, are they talking with a firm other than the 4 that you have under RFP, or are they working with the firms that are under RFP?
No, they're working very closely with us, and I believe that they will be utilizing one of our firms once we can bridge all the issues that are here.
Good afternoon, Laurel Leitner from the City Attorney's Office. The reason that it is taking a little bit of time is that HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, has recently been amended, and the rule became final within the last 6 weeks. We've been researching it, but There are stricter civil penalties. There are now criminal penalties. There are new reporting requirements and tattling requirements. And so before we finalize an agreement with NCO, is who the fire department is working with, that's Finance's current contractor, the city attorney's office recommends that the city have in place certain safeguards, or at least have identified the safeguards that need to be in place. And that should happen optimally at the end of next month.
And then when the fire department's on board, they will also be on board with the secondary firm once you get them online.
Yes.
So everyone will be using the same firm?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Okay.
LADOT.
DOT is here as well, and I will ask the city attorney to update you, because there were two legal issues that we were looking at. First was the length of the contract and when we would be able to actually change, or could we change. The second was the issue about the access to DMV information, and could that be transported to our outside collection agency.
Let me just ask one thing, and I think this was unclear last time. Is it ACS?
Yes.
We have a contract with them, much as our LADOT has a contract with them, much as your 4 RFP groups, that they get all of the primary work. Is that currently in place?
Well, ACS is functioning as the primary collector, and they have a contract with DOT.
Okay. And is our understanding that they get all of the primary
Yes.
work?
That's correct.
Okay.
My
So you can
understanding.
explain where we are with LADOT.
Well, I have an admission to make. I'm not the LADOT lawyer.
Okay.
But I'll tell you what I know, and that is that ACS collects on behalf of the city. And I guess the one question that I was asked to take a look at was whether or not DMV information that was received directly by ACS could be given to a third-party collection agency directly from, that was received from the DMV. And the answer to that is no. It appears to be a violation of the vehicle code and subjects the person who receives the information from DMV to a misdemeanor, which would include fines and possible imprisonment if they violated the terms of that agreement. It does not mean that a third-party collection agency can't apply to DMV, I suppose, and be considered, file an application and be a requester themselves and receive that information directly. But in terms of a person who receives the information, they don't have the authority to then transfer, remit, share that information with another third party.
But as a primary, they can't share it
Right.
with a third party.
Right.
The third party would have to apply as an independent collection.
That's correct.
Okay. Did we determine what the length of the contract is?
Was it 4 years?
Because a couple of us had memories it was 3 and 2, and others said it was 5. It was 4 years.
4 years. 5.
So it's a 5-year contract, not 3 and 2.
Correct.
Now, when does that expire?
Good afternoon, council members. Amir Sadati, Assistant General Manager, LADOT. It is a 5-year contract that expires March of 2011.
Okay. With that contract expiring in 2011, are there, before, I guess we were planning to already go out to, before we go to RFP again, would have some additional information about our meters and all that other on the RFP, so that will come first before we have to then go out to RFP on ACS. Is that right?
That is correct, council member. And I think last time we were here, you were potentially thinking about the Circle contract. They do a collection of the meters, and that contract was changed from a 3+2 to a 1-year contract with 5-year contract with 1-year annual extensions.
Oh, that's the one. Okay. That's takes the money out of the meters.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any resolution in the near future as to this information? Because that's been the conflict of the proposal with the Department of Finance versus LADOT. Is there any solution in the near future to resolve this third-party issue?
It appears that, that the issue is contractual in nature, so we are scheduling a meeting with both DOT and ACS to look if there's anything that we can do within the existing framework. DOT is going to work with us on drafting the new RFP that will go out to make sure that we have referral timelines in for whatever firms do bid. But
is that going to...
That can't be done right now. It seems like...
Is that going to impact positively on this language issue that appears, the city attorney says, is illegal to share? Are we going to be able to overcome that?
I think what happens is that the outside contract agencies will have to have their own agreement with DMV, and what we will be giving them is just the information that the city starts with. And if they are uncollected, we will give them the information that this is the citation number or the license number, and they will have their own agreement, and they'll sort of be starting from scratch.
So this could be cured with the
Yes.
2011 RFP?
Yes, we believe so.
Not before that?
In its entirety, it would be 2011.
Pardon?
In its in the greater scope, it would be cured in 2011.
Yeah, my big thing is what we're looking at is the real story here. There are 320,000 accounts with a value of $280 million are currently assigned to the contract collection agencies. Is that true?
That is
That's
correct.
correct.
And of the $280 million, because we're all looking at our budget situation here, how much is real? Do we know? Have we done enough of a scrubbing of it? Is it basically ambulances, insurance companies, Medicare, Medicaid? Where's this coming from, 280 million?
The 280 million does not include the DOT or the ambulance accounts. Those are accounts that are currently in collection, so that would be in addition. Now, of that amount, approximately almost 80% are tax-related accounts. And so in that, we know that they're highly inflated because they are estimated assessments that we normally protect the city's interests. So also within that are some significantly aged accounts that we are not going to collect, and that will ultimately be
But
written
has there
off.
been an initial discussion of those 280 million, and have we scrubbed those numbers and brought it down to something else, or, these firms that have been involved with us?
It's an ongoing process. I mean, we have had some luck in working with the fire department where they've written off a significant number that's dropped that number down significantly. So that's a continuing, ongoing process.
So the point of bringing in another group is just to help us with this project? So we're looking
The additional collection agencies? Yeah, it's really just to ensure that we've done all possible to make sure that we've collected every dollar that we possibly can before write-off.
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
thanks.
Yeah, my questions are more related to what we do before we actually get to collections. How efficient our process is, and how much of this really should be collected before it even got to this point. How do we structure all this? Do we have departments each doing their individual collections on their own, or have we consolidated collections in a department and actually have it done by a central in-house location?
For the initial billing, we are decentralized, so most departments collect on behalf of the services that they provide. The current structure is that when an account becomes delinquent and the department is unable to collect, and they're given like 3 different notices that they try to collect, then if it's under $3,000, it's to be referred to an outside agency. If it's greater than $3,000, and we recently amended it to $5,000, then it comes to the Office of Finance, and we have a dedicated collection unit that attempts to make collection and then works the account as well. So to answer your questions, I think the city is looking at through the new FMS project to try and take some of the smaller billing processes and to fold that into using the FMS system so that we can standardize our billing processes because they're very diverse. The Office of Finance also is conducting departmental by department reviews of all of the billing and collection processes, and we make recommendations to try and standardize and to become more efficient. And so we have issued reviews on the police and fire department. We're working on the DOT review right now.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask. Are we actually using best practices? And would it not make sense to consolidate our billings from the beginning into one department that was focused on collections and having them do the right best practices right up front and go after those collections aggressively from the beginning? And could we not be collecting a lot of this in-house without having to go to the expense of doing what we're doing now, which is going to a collection agency and having them take a big chunk of what they do collect?
And that was actually the idea of one of Ms. Chick's audits that she did saying that the city should consider centralizing. The city has authorized a study that we have a consultant on board, and their report will be out within the next month, that looked at what is the feasibility of centralizing the entire city for billing and collection purposes. So that is underway. One thing to point out is that the collection agencies do collect their own contingency fees, so that at least we aren't paying them when it gets to that. But you're right, the odds of collecting are much higher if you get it in the very initial billing period.
Thank you.
You may also comment on understanding your collection rate internally is higher than the firms.
Yes, and the collection rate that we gave in the report is really the blend of 4 different firms. So, and they have varying rates. Like, to be fair, for example, like one of our collection agencies for certain types of accounts may have a much higher collection rate and are much
Across the
better.
board, I think your numbers show about 11%.
Yeah, 11.3%, right?
You internally is about 15%.
Right.
And the city gets the 100% of the 15. They get
100%.
20 and 30% less on the 11%.
No, we have changed that to where the collection agencies collect their contingency, so it would be added on top. So the city still gets 100%.
Okay.
Yes.
So they add their contingency.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stephen Elliott, Office of the Mayor. I just wanted to provide one clarification that with regard to ACS, that we can actually amend the contract to allow us to collect or to send additional accounts to collections. We can do that. And I want to add that there is currently a meeting that's scheduled between DOT, ACS, and Office of Finance within 3 weeks. And we'd like to report that within 3 weeks whether or not we're able to come to an agreement. But I just want to add also that their ACS sent the city a letter regarding the possibility of referring additional accounts. I think this was probably 4 months ago. And they said that they would be willing to refer accounts that were 4 years or older. Of course, we do feel that to be able to get something substantial, we need something a lot sooner than 4 years. I just wanted to clarify.
The thing is that I think it's been stated overall that at some point in time, either at 2011 RFP or at some point, those negotiations could go on, but we wanted to clarify where we are today. And today, the city attorney's advising us we can't impose upon their contract, nor can we just give it to a third party unless there's some other cures that go on.
It is true we cannot impose upon their contract, but we could negotiate with them and see if we could get something for now. Regarding whether or not we could share information with a third party, we don't have to take the DMV information that was collected by ACS and provided to the third party. What we could do is the same information we provided to ACS, we provide to the other third parties, and they have the same access that ACS has to the DMV.
Right.
What we're going to do is, because we've held this over a couple of times, is move this report, but we'll ask for that report back in 30 days as to the outcome of that meeting with the city attorney, ACS, LADOT, and the mayor's office to report back to this committee on that one issue. But we will move forward this report on the information that we have today with these different steps and with the information we received as to what we can do. That report back might alter at some point in time, our relationship with ACS, either before the 2011 or at 2011 when we do the RFP, but we'll move what information we have at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, and the report also will reflect the new date of December.
Yes,
for this
the
RFP.
new date, instead of the October date for RFP, it will be December 2009 with a return for operational March 2010. That's another amendment to the report. Okay? Next item.
Okay, last is item number 8, which is a city administrative officer and information technology agency report relative to a request to enter into a contract with Computer Sciences Corporation, Inc. to replace the city's email system with Google Software as a Service product.
We're going to have staff come up, and then we'll have the public comment, and then we'll have staff come back. Miguel, you going to start off?
Sure.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Miguel Santana, City Administrative Officer. I have to be honest, I'm not having sort of jumped into this issue at the tail end. I don't share the same history as the rest of you do on the debate around this particular item. Our office was asked by the Information Technology and General Services Committee to take another look at some of the issues raised in our last memo, particularly around the issues of cost, security, and so we had an opportunity to do that. When I first was briefed on this item during the first weeks that I came to the city, I was concerned about engaging in a new kind of contract at a time where our fiscal situation was so difficult, and unfortunately, in the 2 months that I've been here, it's only gone worse. And so initially, my initial gut reaction was to actually recommend holding off on this particular contract to allow us an opportunity to find a possible other use of the, nearly $1.7 million that is being allocated for this particular contract. And during the time that I've got an opportunity to talk to my office and certainly talk to the department, I got a better sense as to what we're trying to do here. I've also read quite a bit about, the cloud as it's being called, and certainly how it's being developed throughout the country, not just in government, but in the private sector. And so I am now recommending moving forward with this contract for a variety of reasons. First of all, when it comes to an issue of cost, really the difference between this contract and the contract that we currently have is really nominal. There's some minor differences, but in the overall scheme of things, the cost differential is not a significant one. When your council approved moving forward with an RFP, in the first place, I think there was an expectation that engaging in this kind of work would actually result in a windfall of savings for the city. While there certainly are some savings, I have a different opinion than the general manager about exactly how we quantify those savings. Certainly productivity is a good thing, but it's hard to actually bank on productivity. I can't budget productivity. And there are a number of other savings based on elements of this contract that other services that we'd be getting that we weren't in the market for, such as certainly looking at disaster preparedness, having a system that is more reliable. But when you look at it strictly from a cost perspective, I really believe that there really is little to compare on, little differences. I think when you look at the issue of security, I agree with some of the initial concerns that certainly as government we want to have a system that is as secure as possible. The information that we carry, many people rely on to keep secure, and we deferred to the LAPD on whether they believe that we could actually establish a system that's secure, and they have let us know, and I think there are several folks from the LAPD who could talk about this, believe that they've been able to answer that question. At the end of the day, that has to go through its own separate process, and it would be an issue with any system that we would be engaged in. And then the third issue I think that I think your council is grappling with is whether we should explore this kind of partnership on a technology that's not really tested in government. And I've read a lot about that, and there's a lot of discussion as to whether this is the next wave in terms of the use of the cloud. And I think coupled with that, there has to be a discussion about what the role of government is. I think that in the short period that I've been here, one of the things that I've concluded is that we need to engage in a process and be very aggressive with this process, and certainly work with this committee to really look at what it is that we should be in the business of doing. The question is IT a function that's a core function critical to the mission of the City of Los Angeles? Or is it a service that we need to do and engage in our mission? I believe that it's not part of our core mission, and I believe that our core mission is public safety, recreational services, maintaining clean streets, maintaining traffic. IT is not a function that is at the core of what we do. It is certainly a function that we need to count on, and it should be something that we should have work effectively for us. But at the end of the day, it's not at the core. And so what I think this contract does, and what sort of was the major factor in my thinking, is that this moves us forward in a direction of really analyzing and taking a step forward into better defining what our core mission is as a city. And because of that, I think that when all the other factors are weighed, it makes sense to proceed forward. And again, the cost differential is fairly nominal. I certainly provide an opportunity to transfer current staff working on group-wise onto other functions, particularly at a critical time when the department is being significantly downsized due to our budget situation. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to what kind of future do you want to have, and I think this moves us forward in that direction. So I'll be happy to answer any questions related to my report, and certainly Randy and other folks who are here could answer them as well.
Let me just ask one point of clarity. When you say it, in your view, it's not a core responsibility, are you saying that it should be services that we go out to vendor for versus city employees doing it? Or does that make a difference as it relates to looking at it as a core responsibility and not a core responsibility?
Well, I think the first question is it a core responsibility? And I think I've answered that. Then if it's not, then the second question is who does it better? As a city, is this a particular strength that we have? Is this an area in which we have demonstrated competency and could evolve and adapt based on the changes that are required to maintain this particular service? In the area of technology, as we all know, is one of the fastest changing areas. And so the question is, do we do a better job than the private sector does? I think there are a few people that would argue that we do. And so I think we need to look at that as a critical question as we proceed forward in the future. And I think this contract allows us to then focus on those things that we do well in. This is when I was at the county, one of the things that I worked on was in the area of children's services. And I'll give this example because I want to share with you where my thinking comes from. Children's services, as you know, is critical. Its main mission is to protect children. They had an IT function that unfortunately was not working, that was actually hurting their ability to maintain and continue on their core mission. And so we asked that critical question: should this IT function actually be engaged within the city, within the Department of Children's Services? Is there another way of doing it more effectively? And certainly the department didn't like the idea of having a function taken away from it, but at the end of the day, it proved to be a much more effective way to help the department refocus its efforts on its core critical mission. For them, their IT function should be as easy as turning on the lights. It shouldn't be something that they have to worry about. And I think that thinking, applies here as well. So, as we move forward in the next very difficult months and years, I think we will have to start asking ourselves that question. Is this part of what we should be doing? Is this something that we should be doing at all? And if we should be doing it, do we do it the best, or can someone else do it better? And I think this is an arena where I think we've answered that question, that we, whether it's Google or another vendor, I think that was what the process determined. And I'm also a believer in maintaining, once we decide to ask for interest from the private sector, that we should honor that process and make sure that we follow through on our end. But once we engage in that work, I think it allows us the opportunities then to focus on what we do well. And that's primarily why I'm recommending this.
Can I ask one question? I know we're going to ask questions later, but one question based upon their presentation. When you say it's nominal, what's nominal to you?
Well, I mean, when you consider the rebate that we were able to secure in advance as a way of mitigating some of the costs that we assumed we were going to be able to avoid, but because of the time delay, we weren't able to. Really, the nominal difference, if you look on page 7 of our report, between this report and the last report, is really $14,000. So,
well, that is nominal compared to the previous analysis.
Right.
But for us to shift to the new system, that's going to cost us how much? $5 million more?
Well, I believe the entire shift is actually not that amount.
The difference is 1.5 million.
1.5. So to keep the status quo and going to a new system, it's going to be, the difference is $1.5 million.
Right.
Okay, it's not 14,000, correct? Yeah. And that's unbudgeted at this time. And we are going to make it up how?
Over the course of the next 5 years, you mean?
Yes. So how much is it each fiscal year? For the 9-10 fiscal year, it's going to be an additional $1.5 million that's unbudgeted. And how much is it going to cost us for the next 5 years?
So in the 9-10 fiscal year, we're short initially a total of I think about $1.9 million,
Okay.
of which between the rebate that was identified and other funds that were revenues essentially that were unbudgeted, we were able to pay for the full cost without impacting other budgetary items. So the Microsoft settlement, which will bring the city about $1.5 million, is not dedicated to anything and was not included in the budget.
Okay.
So whereas it's available to be used for anything, it will not take a whole lot of any anticipated revenues.
Okay, so we have the Microsoft settlement, the rebate, any other funds that are being used for this?
We have ITA has identified about $180,000, actually maybe closer to $200,000 in savings in their accounts this year as well. Again, money that could be used for any purpose in the city, but was not anticipated when the 9-10 budget was prepared.
Okay, and your recommendation is that it is costing us more, but the benefits of the new system outweigh those additional costs for us as a city?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, there are positions that would be freed up as a result of this contract that currently handle the group-wise program that could now be shifted onto other programs. What's the total number of positions that we believe?
9 positions will be shifted from group-wise to other purposes, and about 60 servers will be available to be used for other programs.
So it's a different way of quantifying the cost. So there's there's a value to having those positions shifted to other pressing needs within our IT function. And at this time, the department has engaged in serious reductions within its own function. So that value, I believe, is significant.
Okay, thank you. Just a bunch of quick questions. We have the group-wise system now, is that correct? Do we have the most up-to-date version available?
Randy Levin, General Manager of IT8. No, we don't.
If not, why not?
We're a few versions behind. We need to do an upgrade, a major upgrade, and that requires capital to do that upgrade. You know, with software, the way it works is that if you pay your maintenance, the actual software upgrade you get included, but generally the costs come in when you need additional labor and additional skill sets in order to actually apply the upgrade. And sometimes it also requires additional hardware.
I thought I heard this answer, but let me ask it again. How do the costs of implementing this potential new Google system compare to costs of running our own current system?
Right. The difference is the Google system, I think, was about $24.5 million over 5 years as compared to about $23 million for the current system over 5 years.
Cool enough. The money's listed for the $1.5 million settlement. Can this money be spent on anything in the city, more cops? We kind of answered
It's
that.
one-time money that could be spent on anything, correct?
Okay. All right. How many bidders attended the pre-bidding conference for this contract?
72. I'm Kevin Crawford, AGM ITA. We had 72 people.
72? How many bids did the city end up receiving?
We received 15 bids.
15 bids. Okay, this is just maybe way out there. I would like to know if there is any benefit to just upgrading our current system and doing another RFP in a few years. Would there be a real cost saving? Perhaps the technology will be even more improved, and we would probably get more bidders, maybe like an IBM or HP and other big name companies. Any speculation on that idea?
Most of the companies that you mentioned bid on this contract, and the 1.5 million, we would have to spend a significant portion of that to do the upgrade of the current system. So we wouldn't have that in our back pocket to then upgrade or move to a new system.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that.
You want other presentations first?
Oh, I'll let them do the rest of their presentations, and I've got a few questions.
And then we'll continue with questions.
Randy, do you want to add in?
Well, you know, I agree with a lot of what Miguel said. You know, we've had a number of discussions with the CAO and the CLA on the, you know, really is the three major points on the cost. I think we've come to a meeting of the minds on you know, budgetary, you know, dollars versus soft savings. And on the security issue, I think we have resolved the security issue. And if you would like to hear from the LAPD, you know, we've been working very closely with them and the Department of Justice. And then on the really big topic on the core mission, we've been having this discussion actually for the last year and a half on what do we do well as a department and what do we not do well. And really be very honest about that, and where should we put our resources in the city? You know, where is the biggest value that we can provide? And you know, what we've come to realize is that one of the areas that we don't provide the best value in is just running servers downstairs. There are other people who can do that better, faster, and cheaper. And those are the hard discussions that we're having internally, but also with the CAO and the CLA, on, you know, where should we put our resources. And last year we had a budget of 805 people. I think we were up to 785. And today I looked at our statistics and we're down to 699 people. And that's before any more of these cuts. So, you know, we have to have these serious discussions about where do we put our resources and what's best for the city, you know, in supporting public safety and supporting the missions of the other departments. So these are very serious and complicated discussions. This approach to technology, I don't believe is a fad, and I don't believe it's a wave. I believe that this is going to be the way it's going to be, not just for governments, but also for the private sector, because they're also engaged in the same discussions. If we only have X amount of resources, should we be doing this, or should somebody else? And it's a hard discussion to be having because, just because you've been able to do something one way for your whole, being doesn't mean that you can't change. And we've had a lot of discussions about this approach, and I believe that this is the right way for us to go, and I also believe that we're going to have a lot more discussion about moving, in this direction. Do you want to say anything?
Any other, in fact, do we have a rep from LAPD, Mr. Riley? Is he here? Or Chief Papa? Do we have a rep from the fire department?
I think the director of systems from the fire department was out today, but I know that, Tim, you probably can speak, for Dennis because we've had the same meetings.
Sharon Papa, Assistant Chief at LAPD. We expressed our concerns early on, and I think that's why everyone keeps looking. LAPD has concerns. We did. We were concerned about the security of our information, the accessibility by hackers to access our information. We were also concerned about the staff, the people that would actually be dealing with our data at Google, because our experience with California DOJ has always been thorough background checks needed to be done on anybody, including custodians that go into areas where our computers are housed. So we had many discussions. We've talked with DOJ, and I think the plan to move forward is acceptable conceptually. I'm going to have Tim talk a little bit more because he actually talked with DOJ extensively about it. So I think Tim Riley is our Chief Information Officer for the LAPD.
Yes, good afternoon. Tim Riley from LAPD. Basically, the discussions with DOJ have been fairly extensive. Their position on that is they don't make business decisions on behalf of an agency. They're not going to make necessarily recommendations on what we do. But what we have presented with them, it's termed Government Cloud by Google, where we actually will have physically and virtually separated servers. So our information from LAPD and perhaps the city as well actually goes to physically and virtually separated servers. They have a limited number of staff members from Google who have access to it. They will have to pass LAPD backgrounds, which include DOJ fingerprints. And then we will control, LAPD staff will control access to that information. So we'll actually have a private connection to Google for that. And with that, DOJ conceptually says basically that they believe that that will meet all of their requirements. Now, they won't render a decision until we actually formally apply to them with a modification to our current information that we access through DOJ, but that's probably as good as we're going to get from them until we submit an application. But again, they've worked with us very closely. They don't see anything necessarily that will prohibit this, and we just need to now get into some very detailed discussions with Google to ensure that everything that they have purported that they will provide to us will be done, including the background checks.
Do you have a timeline of when that's going to occur? Because I think if this goes through, it's only 30 days down the line before they have to get moved.
Well, the application process will certainly take longer than that with DOJ, but we can probably get the application to them once we get the details from Google in a written form, and then we can get, usually what we get is a tentative approval until it goes to the CLETS Advisory Committee, but they only meet now because of budget constraints. They only meet twice a year. So I think their next one is a few months out, probably closer to the end of the year, if not the first of the year. So it would be some time before we actually got the official approval. But generally speaking, now they let you go ahead and operate with that tentative approval, and then they give you the formal approval, or they'll give you some recommendations on change.
Is there a representative from DOJ here?
No, sir.
Any other comments?
Yeah. No, the basic Google email system will be different from the LAPD system. So all city staff's going to use one system, and LAPD is going to use another system?
They'll look identical, but they're going to be physically separated. And the LAPD will be going last because it's a capital investment for Google to build this government cloud environment. And so at the end of that period of time, and through the implementation, we're going to figure out who needs to be in which environment, because there are some other departments such as GSD that have police that have the same kind of data requirements, and we're aware of what all those requirements are, but it will be transparent to the end users where they are.
And why not have all city staff email systems to the highest security possible?
At the end of the day, our desire is to move everybody to the government cloud. We're still trying to work that out with Google right now, because this thing isn't built yet.
So initially, what you're saying is initially LAPD will have that clearance. Eventually, we want all staff to be moved.
Correct.
This isn't a question for LAPD. Are we doing general questions yet, or?
No, the thing is, we could go through those right now, then we're gonna bring the comment cards up, and then we'll bring the staff back if there's issues.
And then general questions after. Okay, hold off for that then.
All right. There's no other question. If you could just have a seat in the audience, and
Yes, sir.
we'll call up the cards, and then we'll come back. Matthew, is it Dots back? David Gerard, Andrew Forrester, Keith Erickson. Your seats. We're missing Matthew there? Matthew, David, Andrew, Keith.
Kent. That's Kent Erickson.
Is it, we have Andrew Forrester? Okay. Well, we didn't have Tori Locke. Okay. Why don't you get started?
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Dave Gerard. I am president of Google Enterprise, which is the division of Google that aims to provide these services to the city of Los Angeles. And I just want to say first, thanks for giving us an audience today and giving us a chance to, giving me a chance to speak. Very quickly, Google's an 11-year-old company, and the division I run is a 5.5-year-old division within that company. And we have a very simple mission, and that is to provide these types of services that the city is contemplating to organizations of all sizes and flavors. And that means small businesses, it means very large businesses, it means schools, including primary education and higher education, and increasingly it means the public sector, and that is government agencies at the federal, the state, and the local level. And what we aim to do really is to provide services that are simple, fast, and easy to use, that people are familiar with, that don't need to be trained on per se, but also deliver them in the context of an organization where there's important needs around security, around reliability, around cost. And that's the aim of my division. That's why we were set up as a company, as a division within Google. And we've been successfully doing this for about, as I said, 5.5 years. There's more than 2 million businesses now that have moved to these services that the city is considering. So we are a few years into this now. It is definitely a technology change that the world is moving to very quickly. And I just want to say in closing, we take this business very seriously, and we take the trust you would put in us very seriously. And I'm here to tell you, from all levels of the company at Google, that when we commit to a service, we are committed to your success in doing what it takes to make this a great initiative for the city of Los Angeles. And we view it as a great opportunity to, be a great example of the private sector working together. And so you have our commitment in that front.
Just a question for you. Any other cities have your service at this point?
Yeah, there's one famous, the city of Washington, D.C., which is doing something very different from the city of Los Angeles. They have not moved their email system, which has been a priority here. They've moved a lot of their documents and website management, which is a different part of the services. It's also part of the services that the city gets. So the city of Washington, D.C. was really the first. I can also tell you the city of Orlando, Florida, just today voted to approve moving their employees to Google Apps. So the private sector has moved, as you'd understand, much more quickly. But increasingly, we're seeing movements. There are about 12 different federal agencies who are at various stages of piloting our apps. So it is something that's taking hold.
Thank you.
Colleagues, we probably will have an opportunity to ask any questions of the membership. You want to speak to them before they leave their seat. Do you have any questions?
No, not now.
Oh. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Matthew Glotzbach. I'm also with Google. I run the product and engineering teams for our enterprise division, working with Mr. Gerard. The points I'd like to make are, wanted to reinforce that, as was said by a couple of the staff members that were here a moment ago, this move of computing into the cloud is by no means a trend. It really is the next generation of computing, much like we went from the mainframe to the current client server and now into the cloud-based environment. And that environment really offers a set of benefits for the city. First and foremost is a cost reduction, not just in the short term, but the long term. The city is actually getting significantly more capability at the same or less price than what you're paying today in things like disaster recovery, additional office capabilities, et cetera. The second is around security and reliability. There's been a lot of discussion about security, and I would suggest to you, as the city reports have shown, this proposed environment is significantly more secure than that's offered to the city today, including that of reliability and disaster recovery. Having data housed in multiple different geographic threat zones were something to happen, natural disaster, et cetera. So it's a significantly more secure environment, and that's been found to be true by the city's own reports. Along that lines, this is our core job at Google. Information technology is our core business. That's all that we do. And so unlike you who are tasked with a number of services to the city where IT may or may not be core, this is core to our business. Finally, as we said, more and more businesses are moving. A large number of commercial companies are moving, and that pace continues to accelerate. And we're also moving in the public sector. We just completed our Federal Information Security Management Act certification and accreditation, FISMA, for the federal government, working with the General Services Administration. So we're seeing this move happen at all levels. And although the city is early, there's a chance for the city to be a leader in this area. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could have those two seats, that Janie. I'm
sorry, one question. So I keep hearing that we're going to be a pioneer in this area, that LA is going to be the first to do this, but then again, I also hear that other cities, you explained the difference between DC and ourselves, but I'm trying to get a clearer picture. So no other city has done as much as we will be doing, correct?
That's correct. With respect to email, the city of the District of Columbia has moved a large number of users into these cloud services. It's hard to say by the time that the city of LA would be fully implemented how many other cities. I don't know the deployment schedules of cities like Orlando, et cetera. But you would be one of the first cities of your size. Obviously, there aren't very many other cities of your size that would make this type of move.
So in the private sector, how many users are using your email system, such as the one you're proposing for the city? So we're going to add a significant number of users.
Right.
How many users do you have on this system already in the private sector?
We have more than 15 million users that are business users on our systems, and they include companies like Motorola, which has 20,000 users on our system. Genentech, which is a biotechnology company, has about 15,000 users on our system. Midwest Vaco, which is a very large industrial company in Virginia, is moving 20,000 users onto our system. So there are enormous numbers of small businesses. Increasingly, there are I would say on the order of several dozen companies that have tens of thousands of employees on our system. So it's not brand new. We're a couple of years into this, and the adoption rate is definitely accelerating, but we are very careful about making sure that large organizations that make the move are very successful in doing so.
Have you proposed this at this scale to other cities and they have declined? Or have you bid on other similar RFPs such as ours and have not won those?
No, what I would say is Los Angeles was definitely ahead of the curve in terms of actually being out there with an RFP and very aggressively assessing the technology. There are lots of cities who are now looking at Los Angeles for sure, but there's not many of your stature. So I think it's fair to say that we are in discussion with a lot of cities now. There are a lot of people watching to see what happens here because there are a few of your stature. But I think I can say very truthfully that there are not many who have looked at this and thought hard about it and then decided otherwise.
Thank you.
Mr. Jamie Court and Maya Zootler. Come on up. Get started.
Thank you, Chairman Parks and members of the committee. My name is Kent Erickson, Senior Vice President and General Manager for Novell. I've heard a lot of discussion today about cloud computing, and yes, it is definitely a trend. I can tell you from visiting many countries in the past 24 days, in fact, this morning was my 21st flight in 24 days, having been through Hong Kong, Australia, India, other countries in Europe as well. I have no idea. I know it's LA time. Many of our customers have the same concern on their mind, but the questions really have gone beyond email to one of a total collaboration solution. What they're looking for are the things that matter most to them, and that's what happens to the user's information, what happens to the data they use to collaborate with, whether that data is used in email systems or other forms or tools that they're using. There is a general desire that this plan or this move to cloud computing work, but there is still a large issue of security and concern, and how we get that security back into the hands of those who need to run those systems, who are responsible for the people who work for them. We have looked at the proposal carefully. We offered in a letter last March an alternative solution. We believe that it's important that the city upgrade to the latest version, GroupWise 8, and we are prepared to offer from Novell key architectural and design services so that you can get the efficiencies you need from a better managed and more centralized solution. We understand that there are a desire to repurpose certain skills and people to new areas of work. We believe that a system of the size that the City of LA uses can be managed with a handful of people, and we could redeploy a good section of those people on the terms of 8 or 9 people could be redeployed elsewhere. So we basically are recommending that we stay the course, we let this technology mature, and that we remain your loyal partner for the future.
Thank you. Ms. Locke.
Thank you, Chairman Parks. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Tori Locke. I am the General Manager for Microsoft State and Local Government Business Practice here in the Western Region. I really just have 2 items that I wanted to address today that go towards potential funding sources that were identified in both the September 1st letter from the ITA Committee to Councilman Parks, as well as the CAO report, or the City Administration Office report, the updated report of October 1st, also addressed to Councilman Parks as the Chair of the Budget and Finance Committee. The first funding resource that I wanted to discuss is the $400,000 that could be funded from citywide Microsoft Office funding. We do agree with the CAO report, the updated report, in which they state that on page 7, Microsoft Office funding projections are based on 2008-2009 expenditure levels for all city departments and do not present a 2009-2010 budget appropriations. So therefore, there are no dollars budgeted in this fiscal year for Office licenses. The city owns perpetual licenses of Office, which means they have the right to use Office for as long as they should choose. And there is no additional cost involved in that. The second item that I wanted to address from a funding resource is ITA's letter of September 1st in the Microsoft settlement reimbursement of $1.5 million. I think there was great discussion on that earlier. I concur with that. Those dollars are for the city's use. There is no criteria on how those dollars can be utilized. So those are part of your general funds. Should you choose to use those dollars to help fund the CSC Google proposal, you can also utilize those funds with your existing GroupWise system to bring it into its current enterprise level that is available. I believe it's 8, or any other way that you wanted to utilize those funds. There is no restriction on those funds whatsoever. So it's been a little confusing from one document to the next, and we just wanted to make sure there was clarification. Thank you.
Jamie Court with Consumer Watchdog. You know, our concern here is really with security and privacy. When we talk about cloud computing, I don't think you really realize how radical a change this is. You save a document today in whatever program, you're saving it on your hard drive. You save it in the cloud computing world, it's on Google servers. And that's why the LAPD requires, I imagine, encryption to send that information to Google, servers that are secure at Google, all of these protections that won't be there unless the government cloud, which has yet to be developed, but is what Google is proposing as a way to salvage this deal, comes around. So you're looking at not saving any money as far as I can tell it, but the risk of breach of security, the risk of information that is now protected by the city getting out in the public is significant. If you think I'm just being a doomsayer, look at Google's own statements to its shareholders when it talks about web-based cloud computing services. These products and services are subject to attack by viruses, worms, and other malicious software programs which could jeopardize the security of information stored in a user's computer or in our computer systems. They're vulnerable, our information, to damage or interruption from earthquakes, terrorist attacks, floods, fires, power loss, telecommunication failures, etc. We're talking about putting a lot of public records in private hands. And what I will tell you about this contract, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't see any financial penalty that's significant if Google mishandles that information or its system fails. I don't see it. And I would suggest if you want to go ahead, you've got to put all the city's information in the government cloud. Make sure that government cloud is secure as possible. Make sure it has SSL encryption in email, meaning your email can't be interrupted and read all along the way. Make sure the browser defaults to SSL encryption. And make sure in your contract, if there's a breach, Google pays and it pays big. Because as I read this contract, there isn't big damages if they fail you. Thanks.
You mentioned that our concern about security is a big deal, and you're questioning it. Is there anything else about Google and what they do and what they might propose and what we as a city would be getting?
And I have no problem with Google. Look, you had Microsoft Sidestep just a couple of days ago lose, as far as I can tell, pictures and files for millions of people that was in the cloud. And maybe they can restore it, maybe not. It's just that cloud computing world. But what Google does, its mission is to make information available to the world. That is its mission. Its mission is to make information more available, not protect information. That's part of what the city does. It protects and it serves. And what Google really does, if you look at its business model and where it deploys its resources, it's advertising. It has its apps on the web. It's free so that you don't have to pay Microsoft, but what they're getting from customers is information about them so they can serve them up advertising. That doesn't fit into this city's model at all. So it goes to the heart of whether you can trust Google to protect the information or invest in security measures, because that's not what Google does.
I understand. But the LAPD officials talked about what they considered to be important, what they felt was going to be in place. Did that give you no comfort?
Well, look, I took a lot of comfort that the timeline is a lot longer than it was from the beginning. I take comfort that for the LAPD, they're talking about some security measures. But what I can tell you now is the information, as far as I can tell, there hasn't been a breach of LAPD security. What gives me pause is when Google says we can't put everybody on the government cloud now. In fact, I don't think there was a government cloud even contemplated until 2 weeks ago when security concerns came out. There is no government cloud. It's being developed. And until it's developed, I don't know why you would make that change unless you can make sure all the city has the same security that you're offering to the LAPD.
Thank you.
One question. I think a response would be from the Google folks is that, well, there's major corporations who are entrusting us with their information, and obviously there are different concerns, government privacy, et cetera, on the side of the company's profit, et cetera, but nonetheless, they wouldn't want their information to be out in the public. How would you respond to that question?
Well, look, it is wrong when Motorola's customers get its information out there, but when, you're someone who the LAPD is emailing about, or when you're someone with a file at the city, you expect a different level of protection than you do from Motorola. And I don't know the contracts with Motorola, but something tells me the breach provisions, if there is a security breach, is a lot more than what is contemplated in this contract. It seems to me, and one thing I would really recommend as a city attorney read this carefully, that it says a very limited liability, not subject to the laws of the state, and in terms of confidential information getting out, it says any information that's provided that the user knows about to the other party is not considered confidential information. So I don't see security breaches and damages being available here. I would bet you Motorola does a little bit better because it could be sued by other parties.
And you're with Consumer Watch?
Consumer Watchdog.
Consumer Watchdog. Who is Consumer Watchdog?
We are a consumer group founded in 1986. We did Prop 103, an insurance reform measure, patients' rights measures. We started a project, and there's been some correspondence from Google and City Hall about this. We started a project about, maybe a year and a half ago, concerned about Google privacy, wholly funded by the Rose Foundation, not by Microsoft or Amazon or any of these other companies who we don't take money from, who fight Google. We did it because we're concerned about not just cloud computing, but privacy in general. And we just...
One final question. Who are you funded by, your group?
We are funded, about half of our funding comes from insurance companies who we beat in court when we take the legal fees from them. They don't do it willingly. And the other half comes from grants and private contributions.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's one article that I've seen that claims that nearly 1 out of every 5 companies that use this software have had major security breaches in the last 2 years. Are you aware of that? Do you think that's accurate, and what do you think in general about it?
Well, I mean, I just think the sidestep issue is a tremendously informative one, where you have a mobile device used largely by younger people, but they very potentially, and it's not Google, it's Microsoft, right? They potentially lost those documents, and it's still not clear whether they're going to be recovered. So these breaches happen. It is inevitable it happens. If you want to do this and you want to protect against the breaches, the only way to do it is to make sure Google has a financial penalty in the contract that if it breaches, that you guys, the city of LA, takes back some of the company. Because until you have that, you don't have Google investing in the security not to have breaches. There's no real liability personally for these breaches under a general consumer relationship today. And that's why they happen. The investment isn't in the securing of the information. It's in getting more and more of our information into the company's hands so they can market us.
If I could, with the chair's permission.
Let me do this. Can we just have your 2 seats as you've spoken, and we can ask Google to come back up? And also Derek, Lynn, come on up.
Okay. And I appreciate the chair giving us permission to have an interaction here. It reminds me of my old television shows. You've just heard what Jamie Court said. Could you respond to that for us? State your name again for the record.
Sure. Again, I'm Dave Gerard. I'm president of Google Enterprise. I'd say there were several.
He was for RTA.
And he couldn't turn his phone on.
I better control that.
Okay, you're on.
There were several mischaracterizations of Google as a company that I think warrant reply.
Yeah, and state your name for the record.
Again, I'm Dave Gerard. I'm president of Google Enterprise. And first of all, information security is actually the most important thing that we do. We store information for hundreds of millions of individuals. We store millions and millions of credit cards. We are a very high-profile target. So we have what I think is a very admirable track record in terms of protecting data. And I think the city did its due diligence over a very long period of time, looked at how we protect data, and came to the conclusion that the data is more secure inside Google servers than it is inside the city's current servers. And I would add that Motorola and many others like them went through the same process. We have over 100 people dedicated to information security who we believe are the very best in the industry, and it is job number one. So in our view, not only does our company have expertise in it, in fact, we believe the trust our users have in us are paramount. They are what makes Google a successful company. So we invest hundreds of millions of dollars every quarter in making sure data is safe, reliable, secure, and backed up in many places. So I want to make sure you understand, first and foremost, the trust that our users place in us are what makes Google go around. And there's nothing more sacred to us than the protection of users' data.
And what would happen if the protection wasn't there, confidentiality was somehow broken? Is there a penalty clause in this that you would reimburse the city or do this or that? Is there any teeth that give us the comfort level that it's going to be a secure system?
There are service level agreements and commitments in the contract. So yes, there are. If the systems fail or are unreliable, then there are reimbursements that are made to the city. So which is normal. I mean, we expect this of an agreement we have with any large city or any large company for that matter, and that is part of the record.
As I understand, they're for failures of upload time, download time, and that the total damage is limited in the contractor up to the actual amount you paid. There are circumstances, if there were a total meltdown of city data, if something like what happened to Sidekick happened with the City of LA's data, that you would want and could, under the current law, go after Google if you weren't limited by contract for a lot more in damages than what you paid in the contract to date.
I just want to respond, then I'm going to ask him to be quiet, but it was good to have a little interchange. Respond to him.
Sure. I mean, first of all, this was done in a very fair and open process. In a company like Google, just like the city has to protect itself, has to protect ourselves. And so we are very disclosive about it, and we make commitments about transparency if and when any loss or leakage of data occurs. But like you have to represent the interests of the city of Los Angeles, we of course have to protect Google's interests as well. So I think we had a very open, transparent, and fair debate about exactly what Google can and will do to protect data, and we stand by our services.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that opportunity to do that.
Thank you. A question was raised about the government cloud just now being built. Is that a concern? Where are you with that, and what would be your response to that?
The government cloud is something that has been in the works at Google for approaching a year. So it is entirely inaccurate to describe it as a result and something that was invented a couple of weeks ago. So I think that is there's no reason to believe that, and it's an unsupported statement. Now what I will tell you was originally designed around the needs and the interests of the U.S. federal government, which has very specific and clear requirements around information security. What we did decide to do a few months ago is to say that we believe we can have one set of infrastructure that is for all government employees, whether that be at the federal, state, or local level. So it is our intention that all employees, government employees across the United States, would run inside what has been referred to as the Gov Cloud.
So when would you complete your government cloud, or is there a completion date, or is it you're building it as you go, and are we the first participants?
Expected in 2010.
2010. Now, should the City of LA wait till 2010 until you have that complete, or does it make sense for us to jump into this now?
We believe our cloud as it exists today is much more secure in many ways than the environment you have today. We submitted just today our certification for what's called the Federal Information Security Management Act, which describes in detail how we comply with federal requirements for data security. So we believe our environment as it exists today is significantly more secure than the one that the City of Los Angeles' information is in already. So I guess that's a long way of saying we believe you should move forward. The government cloud is really important for regulatory reasons in the United States, but we believe the facts on the ground suggest that your data already will be more secure.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have those three seats. Maya, you're up next, but let me ask, Derek is here, David Barber, and is it Shahin Cohen? And then the last call for Andrew Forrester. Okay, that will end our public comment. All right, Maya.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Maya Zettler from Valley Industry Commerce Association, VICA. VICA has not yet taken a position on this issue. However, with any major contracting throughout the city, we ask that several concerns be looked at, namely providing more clarity to the cost to taxpayers, feasibility of this new system, adjustability for the staff in the city, concerns of security and privacy. It is important for us for a more thorough and detailed analysis to be conducted before this major overhaul will continue in the city of Los Angeles. I hope that you will take the time to take a look at these concerns that were raised and provide the city and its citizens with responses to these. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Myra. Derek?
Yes, good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Derek Lin. I come from Solid Systems, where I'm a senior project manager. Solid Systems is a minority-owned, woman-owned company here in Los Angeles, employing about 30 technical professionals. And previously, I had spent 6 years as the IT manager at the LA Police Credit Union, where I was in charge of security, which seems to be the topic of the day. So I want to address that head on. I know security is a major concern. Certainly, it was a major concern for me when I was at the Los Angeles Police Credit Union, working indirectly at the time for Chief Parks. So there's a lot of, I think, fear and some misconception that's been going around, and I do applaud and respect the efforts put together by consumer watchdog groups in general. But in this case, one point that's been brought up, and I just kind of want to bring us back to rationality and some common sense. It was brought up and was accurately, it was true that Washington, D.C. Did go to Google back in 2008, and specifically September 2008. So it is now October, it's been more than a year. Now, even though Washington, D.C. did not go to Gmail, they did put government information in the Google Cloud. Now, if there's actually some significant problem with the security measures employed by Google, I will bet everyone here in this room that we would have all heard about it by now. Now, the staff, city staff themselves have stated on multiple occasions that going with Google is a security upgrade. It will make everyone more secure, not less. So I think in closing, I want to just sort of focus on that a little bit and bring everyone's attention to the example, Washington, D.C. This is all without the government cloud. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shaheen Kohan. I'm CEO of Focal Technology Solutions. We have no interest in this situation whatsoever, except as a concerned citizen. I'm here. If you get the contract or don't, it doesn't make a difference to me. We help 450 manufacturers of clothing in Los Angeles. They use our software right here in downtown LA. The keywords here, I think, is first to deploy, not build yet, ahead of the curve, and high-profile target. And the high-profile target goes to the fact that Google, in fact, is a high-profile target because of so much information that they store. And so my concern is putting it in the putting this information in cloud can pose a risk to the city because they're basically being put, right in the middle of this high-profile target. The Google app has not been adopted by any Fortune 500 companies in the scale that the city is trying to do, and they pointed that out themselves. Even DC is not at the same scale that the city is trying to do, and that's only one case. There isn't any more. Okay, there's other cities who have talked about it, none have done it. Okay, the security outsourcing of the storage basically is not tested. The government, the government cloud has not been built yet. They admitted it. It's only been around for a year. Who knows how much it takes? This is what we call vaporware in our business. It just doesn't exist. And I want to say in conclusion that, this enterprise project in this scale is just an experiment, and the city of LA and its citizens should not serve as a testing ground for Google. They can go do that elsewhere. This should not be seriously considered at this time, and I don't think $1.5 million of extra money from cities should not be wasted on this project. I don't think it will succeed, in my opinion. It just doesn't look like they have it right now. I think we should look at it later, just not today.
Okay, where do you live?
I live actually in Playa Vista.
Playa Vista.
Yes, and my company is in downtown LA. We're right in the fashion district in the California Market Center on the 11th floor.
And you heard about this meeting and you saw what's going on, so you decided to come and testify?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Barber?
Yes, thank you, council members. My name is David Barber. I'm the Business Unit Director for State and Local Civil Services within CSC, and I will be the project manager deploying this system for the City of Los Angeles. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear us this afternoon. I'm very excited about this project. I think the technology is strong, and I think the financial impact that the city is going to receive, both in productivity and avoided costs, are quite substantial. My boss, Tom Anderson, and the president of my company wanted to be here today but couldn't. He did send a letter that I would like to share with the council, if that is possible. And in this letter, Tom reaffirms his commitment of CSC, which is a company that's been in business delivering complex solutions to government customers, to Fortune 500, Fortune 100, Fortune 5 companies. For the last 50 years, we've been making the complex simple. We have more than 90,000 employees in more than 90 countries globally. We've been providing these sort of services for a long time. We've put together a very robust team, starting with Google, who we've been talking about for quite some time, augmented by proven cloud implementation and migration teams in SATA Systems and in Apereo. We are very confident that you will realize the success that's been put forth in response to your RFP, and we look forward to implementing this solution and becoming a strong partner for the City of Los Angeles.
Let me ask you,
Yes, sir.
if I understand it, you implement other people's software and systems.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you work with both companies that are in the process, and maybe even more than just the two that have shown up today.
Correct. We work with actually most of the companies that have been here today, all the major ones.
Now, on dealing with companies that you've worked with, are they primarily private or government or?
As implementing their services or as in implementing for them?
Well, implementing their services, because that's what I understood, that you implement the system. It's not your software, it's not your hardware. You implement the
Correct.
services. So is it, if you've worked with Google in the past, is it primarily private or government?
It's with both.
Okay, with both. And also, if you've worked with Microsoft on the same issues?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then what about the size of the projects?
Specific to software as a service in this particular implementation, this is somewhat unique as far as adding in email systems, technology solutions with either company. They've been quite extensive.
So you've worked with both of them on email systems?
We work with both on email systems, correct.
Of this size?
Correct. Personally, I was at Motorola a few years ago where we implemented for 120,000 plus users into an exchange type environment.
SATA system has a lot more experience implementing large-scale systems. And Councilman Wisar
Are you going to use up his last 7 seconds? Oh, okay. All right. Let me say, if you're through, then let me ask city staff to come back up.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I know this process has been going on for a long time, and I'm relatively new to it, but I have a question about why we didn't implement the upgrades of the existing system first. And I'm looking at a letter that we received a few days ago from Novell, the company that does GroupWise, and I'll just read from it and see if you can answer some of the things it says. The city is paid for and is entitled to the most current GroupWise release, version 8. As such, the city's email system can be easily upgraded and re-architected to provide the same centralized management noted in current ITA proposals while reducing labor and system costs by 75% with significantly lower levels of project risk. Novell is prepared to provide GroupWise architectural and design services to the city without additional cost. I would respectfully ask that you carefully review the materials that we have presented to your staff. The budget figures for GroupWise have not been presented accurately. The materials we provided are an accurate view of costs, benefit, and entitlements that demonstrate the value of Novell's solutions. Upgrading and consolidating your current GroupWise system will indeed reduce cost and mitigate risk for the City of Los Angeles. So the question is, are they right, and would it not make sense to upgrade the system at considerably lower risk than a somewhat unproven sounding cloud system?
Randy Levin, General Manager of ITA. They're partially right. and they're partially not right. And where they're partially right is, yes, we do, as I had mentioned before, we do get the software for the upgrades, where, I think the omission part of this is suspect to me, because, as I had mentioned, there is a big labor component to implementing the upgrades that need to occur. And there's technical upgrades that occur in the background, and there's also technical upgrades that require going out to the desktops. And when you add up the amount of labor that's required to do that, plus the skill sets that we need to do that, plus the fact we don't have the resources to do that, then you start saying, where, are we going to spend all this time and money trying to upgrade what we have so that we still are running what we have today in the same place we're running today and not getting disaster recovery and some of these other options? Or is our time and money better spent going to something new where we not only is it, as the CAO pointed out, basically a wash, for this next year, and get all of these other functions and features to really start to move us forward in technology. So, did we go in and do a deep quantification on exactly how much it was going to cost to visit every desktop and do all of this work? No, but we know how many are out there, and we know the fact that, we don't have a standardized desktop. I don't want to get into too much technical mumbo-jumbo here, but we don't have a standardized desktop, so it's basically a buffet on everybody's desktop. So in order to actually go install software, sometimes we actually have to go out and visit each workstation to do it. It's not the right way to do it, but it's the fact that that's the way it exists in the city today, So, these are the hand we've been dealt, so we've been trying to deal with the hand that we've been dealt. So, the true story is that it's the complete cost of all of that in order to do an upgrade. Do you have anything you want to add?
When we were doing the ROI study, or the return on investment study, this information we were provided by Novell back in March, and it was part of our look at the system. So we priced this against the other systems that were out there. And again, as has already been stated, with the benefits that we get with the other system at roughly the same cost, the benefits outweighed staying with a system that, quite frankly, has a very, very bad reputation in the city.
Well, I can tell you from my own staff, I had one staffer tell me that he curses the current system every day, but they also thinks if it was upgraded, it might well have resolved most of the problems that exist. So, we sort of have both angles there. We clearly aren't using the best practices and the most up-to-date system, so it's certainly possible, were we to do all of those things, that we wouldn't have a system that people would be cursing, and in fact it might be very functional and not at the risk that some people have expressed with this cloud system, which makes me kind of nervous. And I have to say, I should express my own personal bias, because I was just elected to the city council a few months ago. During my campaign, I had a very secure website hacked and rehacked, and it was a complete disaster. And that's obviously much more minor repercussions there, but I can imagine the repercussions of someone finding a way to hack into this system. And it's not entirely clear that the system is ready for prime time.
Well, can I address that?
Sure, please.
As some of the comments that were made here. I mean, there was a lot said about security, and I will not go on the record to discuss what our current security is, because that would put the city in a insecure or unsecure situation. However, what I can tell you is that we will be getting better security with what we're going to be getting from the Google system than what we currently have today. And it's easy for people that don't have to manage the current system to be the critics in the stands saying that this is less secure, but they don't know what we have to go through on a daily basis to make the current email system as secure as it is today, nor do they understand or have knowledge of whatever breaches that we may have today. So, again, I will not go on record to discuss that, but what I will say is that we will have to acknowledge that the Google security will be better than what we do have today. The other point that was made that I wanted to address was that the government cloud is vaporware or whatever. Vaporware usually refers to software and not hardware. They've already developed the software. They're just building a separate physical environment. So to say that that is vaporware, I think, is a very erroneous statement. What they're building is a separate hardware environment for this software to be housed. So I think we need to be very clear on what we're talking about when we're talking about something that could be considered vaporware. I just wanted to clarify that. And then the wait until later, you know, somebody had brought up, why don't we just wait until later? We have to do something now. We have to. Whether it's either doing this upgrade or whether it's going to this solution. But the current system is so far behind, and we have hardware that's 5 to 7 years old that's going to need to be replaced. So we're going to be spending money either way. And we can argue whether it's in the budget or not in the budget, but when the email system goes down, and we are down much longer than Google or anybody else out there, people are going to say we need our email system, and I'm going to come back to the council and this committee and say I need money to upgrade it, I need money for hardware. So I'm not trying to do henny penny, the sky is falling, but when you have 5 to 7 year old hardware, it needs to be replaced. And some of you, unfortunately, have experienced some outages in your group-wise system due to the fact that we've had old hardware. That certainly is not the service that we would like to be providing to the city of Los Angeles. So the point is that we do need to do something, and the question is, for the council, for this committee, do you agree with our recommendation of going to Google? Because we do need to do something.
And on the Google proposal, they provide new hardware?
It's their hardware. It's housed at their data centers. It has 3 levels of backup, basically. So we have disaster recovery. So if there is a major earthquake in the Los Angeles area, if you compare that to what we would be like if we just kept it where it is and how it is, our odds of being able to run our email system are going to greatly increase if there is an earthquake. And quite frankly, that would be the catastrophic event that would happen in this city, and that is the number one way that people do communicate via, BlackBerry, or in this case with Google, it'll be on any device that people utilize.
And what kind of security do they have in terms of hackers?
I'm not the best one to discuss their security, Matt is, but I can tell you that we have been through their security, up, down, and sideways, and it is much better than what we have today. Would you be open to Matt coming back to discuss that?
Sure. If the chair has no objection.
Yeah. Can you see if Matt's there?
Somebody make a little space so somebody can sit up there.
Chairman, may I be recognized? Speak, may I be recognized? Just 1 second.
Yeah, my question tied in with Mr. Koretz's is frankly, what if your system goes down? Do you have a backup to it?
Yes, sir. So, Matthew Gottsbach, Product Management Director at Google Enterprise. On the security question, we've got a multi-layered security approach. It's people, it's technology, it's process. The best thing I can tell you, or the best simplistic way to explain it, is we develop all of our own hardware, all of our own software. We're not susceptible or beholden to third parties who build technology that we then have to wait on them to patch, et cetera. We have the world's best and foremost security experts, a very large team of them, and we've got a full set of processes and systems in place to thwart off any types of external attacks as well as other types of security vulnerabilities. So it really is best in class, and it is, as I stated earlier, it's our core job. It's what we do. Our business is all about information management, information security. So it's the primary thing we focus on.
Now, with my one hacking experience, the hackers not only came in and destroyed my website, but they implanted things on all the backup systems. So they thought it was backed up, but there were little disasters in all of them going backed up through the system. Do you have a way to avoid that with all your backup systems.
Absolutely, and I obviously can't speak intelligently about your specific instance and what occurred to you, but again, the fact that we maintain, build all of our own systems from the hardware, the operating system, all the way up through the software, the possibility that somebody can expose or take advantage of some known vulnerability is very, very low. And if there is any type of vulnerability, we can patch that near instantaneously across our servers worldwide. Regarding the backups, as I think was stated earlier, all of our data is backed up a minimum of 3 times, and 2 of those copies are actually served simultaneously live. So if by chance there were some sort of natural disaster that knocked out our data center or a data center on the West Coast, your data is simultaneously being served live and replicated from another data center in a different threat zone, i.e. a different geography, and therefore you would have complete continuity of operations. In fact, you as a user would most likely never notice that anything happened. On the back end, the systems would automatically fail over, and another copy of your data would get replicated and spun up. So at any given time, we're always storing 3 secure copies of your data.
And I wonder if we could also ask the gentleman from Nobel to respond
let me
to some
say
of these
this.
questions at some point also.
Yeah, if we can come up now, but one of the things I'd like to do, because the hour is getting late, and we'd like to get this to council sometime in our lifetime, that we have I know I have a ton of questions to ask staff, and so I want to, otherwise it becomes a Microsoft Google thing, and that's not quite what we're here for. But if you have some responses to those questions, we can get rolling.
Thank you. Again, Kent Erickson, General Manager, Senior Vice President for Nobel. I just wanted to repudiate one issue about the group-wise upgrade. I think that deploying this product the way it has been deployed, there's much room for improvement. Hence the offer that's in the letter that you have from our CEO, Ron Hovsepian, to let us take a look at how we might improve and bring efficiencies into a centralized way of deploying this and help this upgrade happen for you. I think you will see much, you will realize what we have seen with many other companies, including the state of Tennessee, the state of Utah, the New York City Health and Hospitals, Georgetown University, Sesame Street, many, many customers, Canadian Broadcast, Cablevision, the list goes on and on, where people have deployed, I think, a very, very solid product here, and we would like to help you do that.
Okay.
And we believe it's the financially prudent thing to do in these times. Thank you.
Okay, if we could have staff come back up.
Thank you.
Is that all your questions, Paul?
Yeah. Thanks. Have we, has city staff demoed the new Google email system and applications? What have been the responses?
Go ahead. How many have we demoed?
And I'm talking about not just ITA staff. I mean, did we randomly pick some staff, or how did you even pick city staff if in fact they demoed it?
We didn't randomly pick anybody. We asked for volunteers. We have done currently 92 demos throughout the city for different departments, different groups, so on and so forth. When we went out and asked for volunteers to be in the pilot, we said we're going to look for around 2,000. We got 7,900 volunteers.
And what's the response? Did you write a report on that, or what's the response?
Well, it's been included in our recommendation. We don't write a separate report on that, but I'd say overall the opinion has been very favorable. I mean, the 92 demos translates to how many users, roughly?
Probably 10,000.
10,000? That's a lot of people to demo the software to.
So it's been very favorable. What has been any disfavorable comments?
I think there's been concern about security, like we've been bringing up today, and we've been educating people on security. Anything else?
One of the things that the SaaS type solution will offer that an in-house solution doesn't is there were several things at the end of the RFP process where we made a recommendation, said, if you could just add this one thing, it would be good. And we had a number of those. One of which was that Google at the time couldn't read certain formats that they now can read, and so on and so forth. So over the 6 months that we have been working on the contract, Google has added a number of more functionalities to this suite of software that were added as people were using it. So the next day you come in, it's just there without having to go through a major upgrade every time you get there.
Okay. My final question for now is, what guarantees do we have on the contract and delivery performance? If there is a security breach, what are the repercussions? What is in the contract in that respect?
We want to have city attorney come up too.
The city attorney here?
Ted? Is Ted here?
Good afternoon, Ted Jordan from the City Attorney's Office. The contractor has indemnification provisions, so that should there be a breach of any confidentiality obligation, and there's any claim made against the city, both CNC and Google are actually on the hook to defend, indemnify, and hold the city harmless. Furthermore, as in many contracts, there's a limitation of liability section. Carved out from that limitation liability section is any liability rising out of a breach of the confidentiality.
Okay, so they're indemnifying the city for any breach. Okay. Secondly, on performance, what if it just doesn't work to our expectations? What is the city's recourse in that case?
My recollection is in that part of the contract, if there is a sort of a service level issue and it's not as available as it should be, then the city gets credit back and gets additional service at no charge. In other words, it extends the duration of the license.
Okay, so they cure, but there's no penalty.
Well, obviously, if there's a system failure and it gets to the point where, we don't want just more of a bad system, we can terminate the contract as a result of a breach.
So it's more of a cure. You're going to fix whatever is wrong. In these types of contracts, and I'm not aware, I'm not familiar with these types of contracts. Are there ever any types of penalties? You fail to performance, so you owe us, we lost productivity, and so therefore you owe us so much dollars, as opposed to just fix the problem, but, we lost productivity and it cost us $3 million. Nothing like that in the contract? Are there those types of provisions in these types of contracts ever?
It sounds like what you're talking about is a liquidated damage. That's not necessarily the standard way of doing that.
It's not standard in these types of contracts? Yeah.
It's really all a matter of the negotiation, but I see a lot of contracts that don't have any kind of liquidated damage.
In real estate, we working with the developer, and they promise so many things to the city if we do so many things. Sometimes they do have a guaranteed performance, and they will pay so much amount of money if they don't perform. In these types of contracts, we don't have those types of damages, do we?
Not in this one, and not in most of our software contracts in the city. And I mean, the other point is Google and CSC are very motivated to make this work because of the potential revenue generation for them, via other cities and state governments. So, I mean, they have all the incentive to make it work and not to breach.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing I would add is I would like liquidated damages added to this. Can we do that without taking it off of the track we're in?
It would be, we'd have to go back and renegotiate that. That's a fairly significant change, but,
Well,
if you can instruct us to...
Hits them over the head if they don't perform, in the pocket, so to speak.
That type of provision always puts what we call a little bit of skin in the game. So,
I see. What I'd like you to do is, if we pass it out of committee today before it gets to council, or when you're at council, if there's a possibility to put a liquidated damage clause in there, maybe talk to them ahead of time and see what kind of liquidated damage you
I
might.
could add, Mr. Rosen, and we are one of the first in these areas to do as much, and so we are treading on new ground. There is risk involved with the city, so is there a way to balance it? I'm not saying there is. I'm not saying that I would want to see liquidated. I just want to see if you could have that conversation, because the city is taking some amount of risk here to venture into this new area. So it may be possible. I don't know.
At least explore it to that degree and present it to us in council if that is an option that makes sense or not. I certainly would like to instruct you to look at that as an option.
Okay.
That's it for me.
Let me just go through a list of questions. One thing I was wondering is that, in general, is there any compatibility between Microsoft and Google applications?
Yes.
Between Microsoft and Google, as in if I create something in Microsoft Word, can I then read it in Google? Absolutely.
Okay. the issue is that the applications may not be identical, but there is compatibility.
Yes, sir.
And then the other issue is that we've heard back and forth as it relates to where Google and these types of systems that we're talking about, where they're operational. Do we have any examples of any large governmental agency that Google applications that we're considering are currently operational?
The largest one is the one that was mentioned by Google themselves, which is Washington, D.C., and they are specifically on the application side, not the email.
And I believe right now that they're implementing the U.S. Navy on their email system. However, we have not been allowed to actually talk to the Navy ourselves about what they are doing specifically.
And Councilman, if I may just sort of add to Kevin's response on the compatibility question. Compatibility is a two-way street. The compatibility, in my experience, going from a Google app created document into a Microsoft Word environment was very good. I didn't see any issues. Going from a Microsoft Office or Microsoft Word created document into Google Apps, there were issues. It's not as compatible as going in the other direction.
Okay. All right. Let me just ask also, one of the things, for Miguel, one of the things, and I really tried to read every word of your report.
I don't doubt that.
But let me just, one of the things I thought was kind of interesting, having read a lot of CAO reports, CLA reports, this report to me had more instances where we kind of hedged a little bit. We said things like money may be able to be used, or we said things like when we got to the law enforcement, we said they are considering or something signing on. They never said they were there, didn't say, you know, they're a player. And then when they got to DOJ, they were even a little more distant, saying, hey, we'll come on after you guys test this, which means you got to give a contract. So I'm just kind of walking through this and reading this, and I just didn't get a sense that we jumped on this and said, this is where we got to go. We gave us a lot of options. We hedged a little bit. And I'm just wondering about the wording and how it, because it just didn't give me a warm feeling in my stomach that we should jump off this cliff together.
Well, I mean, I think in part what you're reading is, you know, we didn't want to misrepresent what may be really behind some of these issues. With LAPD, you know, they shared with us that they felt they could move forward, but of course the DOJ has to approve it. And I'm familiar with similar kinds of processes where we may choose to move forward on in a particular course, but ultimately we have another third party that makes the final decision as to whether it's going to be allowed. In this case, it's the DOJ. So I didn't want to give the impression that if we approve this, then the DOJ is an automatic yes, because that is not what we understand, and I think you heard that today. So with the information that the LAPD has, as you heard today, I think they're comfortable with moving forward with that caveat that, of course, DOJ ultimately makes the final call. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, I want to be careful in not over-representing what it is that we're getting. Even in the case of the rebate that we were able to negotiate, I know there's been some conversation with that. The rebate is something that was negotiated early, you know, as part of the original proposal, and it was simply our request that that rebate be given to us in advance. Again, similar to what was said in having some skin in the game. If in fact there's a belief that we're actually going to have other governments be interested in joining on, then Google should advance us that rebate. But if we don't reach the 100,000 number of users, as this was originally intended in the original language, then that rebate goes away. We have to pay it back, and I wanted to be clear about that. So, you know, the hedging may be because we didn't want to over-represent what it is that this is.
Because one of the things that's what concerned me is that, you know, I thought we'd missed a 1 or 2 off of that rebate, and so we look and it's like 250,000 that they're advancing. But on the other hand, if we don't go and get the county and somebody else, you're going to pay it back at a later date. And so you're looking at that and saying, well, that at best is one-time money, short-lived. You're gambling on the come that you will get them in, and maybe it's more beneficial. But in trying to create this system today, does that put us in a position of stability? And that concerned me. The other thing I was looking at is the issue of the pilot. It's like a 3-month deal. So are we running parallel systems while the pilot is up?
Randy would probably be better said.
Okay, so the system, current system doesn't go away. Okay, now, have we given any consideration that if we move all the way down the line on this and things just go haywire, what does it cost for us to at least return to the environment that we're most comfortable with?
Well, we have looked at that. I mean, excuse me. From a legal perspective, that I think that's covered in the contract. From an implementation perspective, look, the devil's in the details, and we haven't done the detailed implementation planning because that's the first thing that we do in a project like this, is to get it approved and then start to go down the path of doing the detailed implementation planning. But because of the fact that this is an outside email system, not housed in-house, it shouldn't take that much for us to roll it back, if we have to roll it back to where we were originally. But again, that's why we're doing a pilot. I mean, we really want to be able to prove out whatever issues there are through this pilot so that we can then go into full implementation.
Okay. But when you say we'd be able to roll back very easily, are we saying to Microsoft or another?
No, we could roll, no, we'd have to Novell, to where we were.
Okay. So the issue is that, but again, we haven't figured out what that might cost.
To roll it back?
Yeah.
No, we haven't gone through the detailed cost assessment of rolling it back.
Because that's the kind of detail I think we need to think about, because with all of these systems, and again, you know, having been here for a little while, we don't do well on big systems. We seem to keep doing them over and over, and about, you know, the third time we kind of get a charm. But the issue is that I don't know of any large system that we hit it on the mark the first time and roll with it. So I think we have to have contingencies in there. What happens if it just doesn't work out the way we thought? And I think because we've seen enough of that in our history.
Mr. Chairman, could I comment on that? I think you raise a good point, and I think it's not just true for the city, but for other governments, is whether we can do these kind of major systems. And I think that's the fundamental question that's before you. And I think the challenge is that, as history has taught us, is that we're not very good at doing these kinds of systems. And so the question is, if we're not good, but we need to have them, I mean, email is not a luxury. It's the same, as important as having electricity and having running water. Even under the worst possible economic situation, we'll always need an email system. And so the question is, if we're not the best in doing this kind of work, then how do we still get it done and ensure that it's done more effectively than we have it now?
I also think that there's one big difference between all of the other projects that we do that involve either doing custom software or packaged software. We're really not going to be modifying this. I mean, this is email. I mean, we're going to put in our directory, but we're not going through what do you want to have, what do you want to see, what are your requirements from the ground up. And that's a big difference, because I think that's one of the places we get caught up in the city, is in really truly defining our requirements and defining our scope. And our ability to make major changes to this is fairly limited. So actually, it increases our ability to successfully implement it.
Let me just ask, if you go to the CAO's report on page 8 and 9, one of the things, if you were teetering on, in reading this, whether you were teetering at all, after you read page 8 and 9, you have even greater concerns as to, it's like, you know, basically commending somebody with faint praise. I mean, we went through each one of these, and you look at these paragraphs, and it almost as though it's saying, hey, if you want to go that way, fine. I mean, the issue on such things as disaster recovery, I don't know if we don't have it, we've never used it, we don't have we have not seen necessarily a need for it. So to have it proposed as a major benefit, you begin, it's like having a swivel on your video camera. It's great, except you may have to read 2 books to figure out how to use it. And so, I mean, it just, you begin to look at this stuff and you're saying, okay, that's great, remotes, we have the storage. All right, we're getting by on the storage we have. How much do we pay for unknown amount of storage in the future? If you get it for free, you know, thank you. But again, to label it as a benefit when we've not made any great concerted effort to say, go get me more storage. So those are the things as you go line for line. Video conferencing. You know, they were talking about that 15 years ago. I don't know if there's a camera in the city that allows video camera. So we've obviously got by without it. I mean, so these are things that you just look at and you just go, okay, that's great, except we can't quite get our arms around what do we do with it if they gave it to us. Productivity, we see in every budget that we have in the city of LA at the beginning of the year, $3 to $6 to $7 million in productivity gains. They never quite come to conclusion. So we go to find somewhere in that budget, 5 to 6 million to compensate. Sounds good when you write it. It's just that they never come to fruition. And as you said, you can't budget soft money. You can't budget this intent of productivity. You can't stick it, you can't pay a bill with it. And so when we talk about productivity, often we're putting a figure on it well before it's materialized. And so you get finished with it and you say, okay, it felt good. It's a process, except we didn't quite achieve it. And so when we go through these 2 pages and we look at these different issues, they're all nice reading. They're all give you some insight, except if you ask to put a quantitative dollar on any of them, first of all, you say, well, do we really need it? And secondly, when you got finished with it, what could you do to spend it? I mean, so that's my concern as I've gone through the report. There's a lot of information, just don't know how meaningful it is to get to this point. And again, and from when I go through it, you know, and again, certainly the budget drives a lot of stuff. I don't get a sense of the urgency to go in this direction so quickly, because if, you know, certainly every system we have is going to be down a while. It's going to have situations where, you know, it's not going to work exactly the way we want it. But on the other hand, we seem to get up the next morning and it rolls again. I mean, you know, like if I'm at home and my remote computer doesn't work, I go do something else until it pops back up. I don't sit there and stare at it and, you know, and say, you know, come up. You know, these are things I think we have to realize. The reality of this stuff is that none of these things are going to work all the time, but how much money are we going to spend for that, for what we think is perfection? The other thing I found difficult to follow, at one point we said this is like $5 million for 09-10. Then somewhere in another paragraph we say it's like $7 million, but we don't quite say is that per year. And then in another paragraph we say it's going to be $24 million. You go, you know, somewhere we added all that up, but it's not clear how we went from 5 for 09-10 to 7 to 24. I mean, so as I go through it, I mean, and I'm still not satisfied that, you know, DOJ, as we said when I was here in ITGS, if they walk away from us after going through all this, what do we have? We have to go back and build another system for LAPD, and because they're not going to commit until you finish. And if you don't hit the mark at the finish line, they won't be there. And if they're not there, LAPD's not going to be there. You could impact the fire department. You could end up, the harbor department, or whatever, who else is involved with all of these local law enforcement agencies. You know, so it looks like we're going on a promise. I just don't get a sense that substantively we can support it. And again, I try to read this stuff and understand it. I'm not a red wire, green wire guy. I just kind of get an idea whether this stuff works or makes sense. And then when you start putting dollars to it, with the final analysis, does it make sense for us to be spending this kind of money in a budget crisis that we don't quite know gets us there? And I think that's what my biggest concern is. And again, the urgency case hasn't been made as it relates to, you know, what happens if you don't, you know, we've had systems that were outdated 15 years, and they still are outdated, and we're still using it. So, I mean, what are we talking about as far as dollars and how quickly we have to resolve that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to respond to, but I'll start at...
Once I get on a roll, I just...
Well, I mean, on the issue of the add-ons, it's sort of like when you buy a car and then you have all these extra add-ons that you weren't in the market for. That's exactly what it is here. And we weren't in the market for disaster recovery and for added storage. And so I wasn't quite in agreement with my colleague about whether we should account those as real savings, because very frankly, we weren't looking to buy those things. But at the same time, it would be inappropriate not to at least acknowledge them and recognize them as additions that we're getting, that even though we weren't in the market, are worth considering as part of this contract. And so I think the wrong thing would have been is to not refer to them at all, or certainly look at them as negatives, when in fact they are positives.
No, I just think they should be, like a lot of stuff, nice to know, nice to have,
but we weren't in the market for them. I agree. And I mean,
Can I make a counterpoint on that one? Last year, we did a tabletop exercise when we did the Golden Guardian exercise, and the exercise was that we were supposed to have no communications. How is it that we were going to handle an earthquake in LA? And almost every table, I'm sorry Jim Featherstone's not here, but almost every table got up and said they were going to use some form of electronic communication, even though the exercise was there wasn't any. And then 5 days later, we actually had an earthquake in July, or 6 days later, and we stopped having communications in this city for a period of time because it was we had some technical problems, as well as we had saturation. And it came to light again, the issue of how is it that we're going to communicate if there's an earthquake in this city. So I agree with Miguel. It is viewed as an add-on. It isn't something we've asked for, but it's a benefit that comes with this system, and I think it needs to be viewed, with maybe more weight than the rest of these, given the fact that we've got earthquakes, and we have all of our systems here in LA.
We could certainly walk through the numbers if that would be helpful.
Yeah, because the thing I just picked up, like there's the 5, the 7, and the 24. And
is there some, do you want me to just walk through it and you can ask questions?
Am I to assume that 7 is 7 per year?
Which 7 are you referring to?
Well, in the report, in one part of the report, it says it's 5.9 for the 09, 10 year. And then later in the report, it talks about an addition, what is it, that there's 7 million that was also quoted. And then it says later that there's 24 million over a 5-year period. I'm just trying to get a sense of...
So the full 5-year cost of the proposed transition to Google is $24.5 million. And then we tried to break that down into different components because a portion of that cost is for specifically staff and servers, which the proposal is to retain but not use to support the Google system.
Let me show you. That was another thing that was confusing. How do we count it as savings if we keep the bodies and move them somewhere else?
We don't count them as savings. In the initial we used the term. What did we say? Reallocation of existing resources.
No, but the thing is that whatever they cost, they're going to go somewhere else.
Absolutely.
And who's going to pay for them?
The city will continue to be on the hook to pay for them. And it's included in the $24.5 million as a cost to the city.
But then also we say that 50 servers. Initially, we were saying if don't replace them, that was going to be savings to help fund the system. Now we're saying let's distribute them elsewhere.
Right. So a portion of the servers, 30 of the servers, will be retired and not put back into service. That's going to be a savings to the city because we won't have to pay for the power or the software for those. 60 of the servers, the proposal from IPA is to retain those servers in the city but use them for other city purposes on other systems as sort of increased capacity. We consider that to be a cost of the Google system, but we also want to acknowledge that whereas the proposal, it's not a cost of the Google system, but it's a cost of the proposal to the city. But we want to acknowledge that those resources will no longer be required to be dedicated to our email system, but they can be used for other purposes. So it's they could also be, shut down, we could get additional savings. And this similar argument would be made for the staff, that those people who are currently working to support group-wise, the plan is that 4 of those people will continue to support Google as the new system is implemented. The remaining 9 will continue to be paid, continue to be a city cost, but will be used to support other services within ITA. So we consider that to be a cost. It's identified as part of the $24.5 million, but we wanted to call out that there was a sort of, those resources would be reallocated and used for other purposes. It's not specifically dedicated to Google.
Yeah, because I would have thought if we were trying to make a case in-house that we're going to fund this at a savings to the city, we'd be accounting for those 13 bodies that no longer need to get paid, and that money's available, and we'd be, but again, to move it just gives an impression we're spending it elsewhere, and we're basically talking 1.7 or whatever, we're going to, 1.9 or whatever we have to find for this year, and then we go back and find the 2006 lawsuit, and your first reaction when you read that is to say, well, if it's 2006, why haven't we gotten it before 2006? And then if it's available, we don't say use it, we say something like we may use it. But all of these things are couched in terminology like it's not definitive.
I just want to comment a couple of things. One, it's been our process and our policy to cascade hardware, because this isn't the only system where we have some antiquated hardware. So if we have an opportunity to cascade newer hardware to other applications that require it, we do that so we can efficiently try and
You just mean move it?
move it, yeah. So we can efficiently use resources that we have as opposed to buying any new hardware in other areas. And secondarily, this kind of gets into a mixed area, but it's because we've lost so much staff already and are going to lose more by one way, shape, or another. The fact that the resources now we had them factored in initially, now they're not factored in. It's getting murky to figure out whether or not that's a true savings or not. But my point is, our ability to run what we have today starts to wane, given how many people we have lost in the organization and will be losing.
Mr. Chairman, I could understand your concern on page 6 where we talk about the settlement. I can't explain the history as to why that wasn't shared with you prior. I asked the same question when I first learned about it. But the reason we say can be used, because I also want to be clear that this money is not earmarked for this purpose. This money has no restrictions. It could go to the general fund, it could go to pay for officers, it could go to pay for a number of things. So when we say can be used, that's ultimately at the discretion of your council. So I'm not going to direct the funding when it's in fact at your discretion as to how it gets spent.
I understand that, but what I would expect on a report that we're trying to cobble money together, that we'd be saying, here's the source of money that the CEO recommends that this be used. Because when you say can be used, then the other 50% is it available? And when you see 2006, you wonder, where's it been since 2006? And if you say can, does that mean we haven't quite got our arms around it yet? Where is the money?
No, it just means it's at your discretion. That's what it would be.
And see, what adds, to a budget committee's distress is that on one of the paragraphs, we actually have like a little blank check, number 5, that says, and then we'll kind of seek out where there's other money that we may need to find. You say, well, where? Because there is no other money except the reserve fund, the general fund, things like that. I mean, so
for the $14,000, is that what you're referring to?
Here it says here, instruct the ITA assistance CAO to identify additional funding that may be required if sources identified in this report are inadequate for the 2009 and 10 contract.
That's a $14,000 gap, sir.
Okay, but the other side is that that's if all of this other stuff comes to pass. So we don't say 14, we just say other financial resources. To me, that means that we're, like we used to do when I first got to council, put out a motion and say, find me $1 million. There's no million to find.
So can I ask a question on that? So For the 5 years, it's going to cost us an additional $5 million or so that we haven't budgeted for, correct?
Over the 5 years, it's 1.5 million.
Over the 5 years, it's 1.5 million.
Yeah, that's our projections based on what we would have to spend to support group-wise as opposed to that we would have to spend.
Oh, I see. And that's been funded, I mean, is the settlement, the rebate, and what else are we using to fund that 1.5?
There's $180,000 or so of savings that ITA has already identified this year.
Okay, so that's accounted for. The 1.5 additional cost is accounted for the 5 years.
Funding has been identified, but it's at your discretion to use it as you.
I see.
No, we're not going to hold it.
Fine.
You get a sense of where my concerns are, and I won't belabor the other 37 questions. I'll send them to the video conferencing.
Does that mean you're approving the contract?
No, I'm a step-by-step person. Okay. Does anybody got any other questions? No, we want to move this out of committee today. We want to send the council. When would this get to council?
It's tentatively scheduled for next Tuesday. I believe it's the 27th.
Okay, and then isn't there a timeline or something that we're trying to meet?
What's the deadline? Under the Administrative Code 10.5, you have 60 days to act from when this contract was sent to you. That was on October 2nd. 60 days.
Sent to the committee or sent to council?
Well, when this contract, this report was transmitted and received by the city clerk,
Okay.
60 days from that point. That date was October 2nd, so 60 days from that date is Tuesday, December 1st. That's the last day for the council to act. So if the council itself doesn't take an action up or down on the contract, then under 10.5 in the Administrative Code, the contract is deemed approved.
Okay, very good. So that next week doesn't hamper that at all?
It shouldn't, because that's Tuesday, December 1st.
Okay. All right. Well, colleagues, if there's no other questions, we have a choice that we could either do one of two things: send this to council, vote on it, or send it to council with no recommendation. I get a sense that there may be a split vote. I don't think it's going to be unanimous. So,
Yeah, it would be my hope that we could send it without a recommendation and let this discussion continue in council, get back a little more information on a liquidated damage issue, which I think is important, and maybe just flush out some more answers from, I think, Mr. Chair, was one of the best meetings of ups and downs and thises and that's among the various people. I think it was very healthy for us. But I think we should send it without recommendation.
you have an issue on that?
Yeah, that's fine to send it with our recommendation. I do think you need to flesh out better the costs. I know it's written in the report, but you have to go to different places to get the answers about exactly what the revenue is and how much is this going to cost us short-term and long-term.
What we'll do is send this to council with no recommendation from the committee, and that we will hopefully that all of the conversations the clerk has received so that we can have an adequate report, and so that we'll move with that. And so if there are no other issues on the agenda, okay, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.